Well, hi. So on behalf of the initiative of the Fellows of the DFW chapter of SIM, I wanted to share some research with you, some ideas with you, and this time on the topic of blockchain. I wanted to share a business framework, a business model framework on blockchain in answer to the question of when to blockchain. So, very much inspired by Hamlet, to blockchain or not to blockchain is most probably a question that numerous CIOs and CEOs have been asking. There's always a lot of hype around this technology, and what I think is interesting to note is that some people do not perceive blockchain as necessarily a disruptive technology, but rather as a foundational technology. And what that means is that, the introduction of the technology does not cause major shifts immediately, but rather that it changes such fundamental aspects in the way work is done that eventually there's going to be widespread change, widespread shifts. And so this, of course, then raises questions about how best to prepare for this infrastructural shift that many have predicted will happen with this distributed ledger technology that is blockchain. This is ongoing research, and in fact the next couple of blogs that I'll be doing as part of this series are going to be further interviews and further elaborations of this framework that I will be talking about today. So I've been collaborating with a colleague of mine, Simon Mack, who's the Executive Director at the Caruth Institute at SMU, and also three gentlemen that are from the startup sector. So Dallas has been an interesting place to watch developments in the blockchain space, and so we've had wonderful opportunities to collaborate with some folks out of the startup sector. And so James Johnson, Karthik Pichai, and Sean Caputo. Okay, so what I've got here is a fairly large framework that is about trying to answer this question, when to blockchain. Of course, organizations might choose to go with database, tried and trusted database technology, rather than this distributed ledger technology in order to accomplish a lot of this work that, we are now identifying blockchain as being such a good solution for. So the key idea here is to ask the question, when does blockchain make sense compared to other technological solutions such as relational databases? And there are two dimensions here. The first one is network complexity. So as soon as you have many players in a network, especially independent third-party players, there's a lot of coordination that has to happen, and therefore a lot of intermediaries. Take banking, right? Any banking settlement, payment settlement requires intermediaries to essentially make that transaction work. And so the larger this network, the more complex this network, the more diverse the actors in this network. So network complexity makes a huge difference. So the higher the network complexity, the more cause there is to suggest that blockchain is the way to go rather than another kind of infrastructure. All right, our other dimension, the Y dimension, is about the verification complexity of assets. We have physical objects in the real world, including people, right, who have information about them represented in the digital space. And the difficulty is, of course, marrying those two things up. and doing so in a secure manner and in a reliable manner. When we're talking about artworks, right, how can we be sure that that artwork that we're tracking digitally is in fact the artwork that we have in the physical space? We can have, transparency of provenance. And so that becomes an issue. So the more you have questions, or the more there are struggles with provenance and security of identity, the more likely blockchain is a solution that makes sense. So if we put all this together into this 2x2, what we see then are 4 different business models. And so let's start with the first one here. This is the frictionless transaction network. So the idea here is that we use the blockchain technology pretty much in-house, right? So JP Morgan Coin is an example of this. So in order to manage transfers of funds from one JP Morgan account to another JP Morgan account, typically the way that would have happened is that you needed all sorts of intermediaries and therefore transaction costs in order to make that cash transfer. But if we use blockchain with, tokens and, basically sort of have this scripts, right, passing between one account and the other account, then we have no external players involved, and the transaction is a lot smoother and also less expensive. So this is a solution that, internally for integration, especially integration, that requires high transparency and requires, a very secure audit trail, right? Blockchain is certainly a possibility. But by and large, you could have done that with a, fairly standard database as well. Now let's move on to sort of the secure transaction ecosystem. So the reason this, we're calling this an ecosystem is because you have a high number of, sort of a high level of network complexity. So lots of different actors. And here, sort of the business model, very timely settlement of payments. And so James Johnson, who is on our team, has worked on a prototype called Vento, or toll system in Portugal. And the idea is that all the transactions related to buying food or, getting gas or, paying for the various toll roads, because there are multiple, this toll system is made up of multiple vendors of toll. So you have to pay multiple owners of that part of the road, right, toll road you're driving on. So it becomes very complex if, we have these microtransactions that each time require third-party interventions. So the idea here is that we can build an in-house transaction processing system that, essentially takes the intermediaries out of the equation and makes the whole process, less expensive and more transparent in terms of, what amount of money goes to which toll operator, also toll road operator, and also does so in a very quick fashion. Okay, so that's the secure transaction ecosystem. Over here, we have this idea that we can build systems for self-sovereign identity. So essentially in the realm of credentialing. And so here we have, organizations like MIT, a university that's decided to make its diplomas digital. So instead of getting a paper copy of your diploma, you basically now get, this information on the diploma blockchain, thereby allowing you as a student at any point in time when you need to present this diploma, that you could basically be able to show it on your phone, as opposed to having to get the original copy or a certified copy of this diploma, having to go back to MIT to get it in order to enroll in the next university or potentially for a job application or something like that. So in order to reduce the transaction costs associated with credentialing, the university has decided to essentially build this very secure infrastructure that people can look up the authenticity and sort of ensure the authenticity of a student having taken a certain degree program and completed that degree program at MIT. All right, and so, now the network complexities, so lots of actors, and also the asset verification, because we're dealing with, let's say, fruit that has been grown under certain conditions, transportation requirements, and so on, right? Sort of tracing physical objects in the real world, right, and tracing those with this digital trace data, if you want, in parallel, and basically being able to match all this up, right? And so here we have, of course, some examples. So the IBM Food Trust blockchain would be one. Then, of course, the Maersk Trade Lens, which essentially tries to pull together players, in this global supply chain, and tracking and tracing all the shipment of goods, not only from the traders, but also through various ports of customs and verification agencies and so on, to essentially map the entire value chain and supply chain of a certain item. Our research at this point in time, what we're trying to understand are, the implications of using blockchain in each of these quadrants, the value this produces, especially the relative value with regard to other kinds of infrastructures, and through that, hoping to give you as CIOs and CEOs, business leaders in general, some guidance in terms of assessing your own business models to determine, does it make sense for us to use blockchain? Is this going to be a valuable investment in an infrastructure technology where there's a good chance, and certainly lots of people have predicted this, that this is an infrastructure technology like TCP/IP, which eventually will have the kind of network effects that will really bring sea change. And so how to be prepared for that is part of what I'm hoping to share with you. Thanks very much, and hope to see you next week.